Pretty much know what's above ground at Alcatraz Island.
But now a new study finds there are hidden buildings and tunnels underneath the prison yard.
Scratched into stone, 60 feet beneath Alcatraz, 4 words waited in darkness for over half a century. They left me here. Beside those words, a skeleton. Fingers still wrapped around a leather satchel filled with coins from 1961. No name, no record, no explanation for how this person ended up in a tunnel that doesn't exist on any blueprint ever made. In 2024, construction workers found this body. They found the hidden chamber it was buried in. And they found evidence that Alcatraz was never just a prison. It was the center of something the government sealed away and hoped the world would never discover. What you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about America's most infamous island. Because the real story of Alcatraz, it's still being written. The discovery. The wind that whips across San Francisco Bay has always carried whispers, cold, sharp, relentless. For decades, tourists have wandered through Alcatraz's crumbling cell blocks, snapping photos of rusted bars, and imagining the ghosts of Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly.
For nearly 3 decades, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary housed America's most notorious criminals. Figures like Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly walked these very grounds.
It's become a museum piece, a relic. But in the fall of 2024, behind roped-off sections where visitors never go, something changed. A restoration crew was preparing for a museum expansion when they noticed a section of wall that didn't match the original blueprints. A few bricks were loose, almost as if someone had sealed something shut in a hurry decades ago. Behind that wall, they found a narrow gap leading into darkness. At first, they assumed it was an old maintenance shaft, maybe an abandoned sewer line. But when federal authorities arrived and the FBI took control of the site, everything shifted. This wasn't some forgotten utility tunnel. The construction was precise. Steel brackets lined the walls. Multiple barriers had been installed to ensure it would never be found. The deeper agents descended, the more wrong it felt. The tunnel twisted sharply, dropped into suffocating silence, and had no connection to any known pathway in the prison. There was no light, no ventilation, no sign that anyone had walked these passages in over half a century. And then they reached the end. A sealed iron door, rusted but unbroken, embedded into solid stone with industrial-grade hinges. The silence behind it was thick, almost alive. Whatever lay beyond had been kept secret for a very long time. But here is the catch. When forensic teams analyzed the materials, they found serial numbers on the steel dating back to the early 1920s. That would mean parts of this tunnel were constructed before Alcatraz officially became a federal prison. Someone built this passage for a purpose that predates everything in the official record.
Anything that was brick to these guys said, ooh, Spanish tunnels. So every guy that did time down here, when he got back up top, he blabbed and gave rise to the stories of Spanish tunnels.
What they found on the other side would confirm their worst suspicions. The Chamber of Secrets. The moment that door swung open, agents stepped into what felt like a time capsule. The air was stale, untouched by decades. Boxes of yellowing documents lined the walls, their edges crumbling at the slightest touch. A primitive radio system sat in one corner, its dials frozen in position. Hand-drawn maps of San Francisco Bay currents were spread across a makeshift table, marked with coordinates that matched no known shipping lanes. But what stopped everyone cold were the 3 cots pushed into the far corner. These weren't thrown together carelessly. They were arranged in precise formation, positioned as if someone had been living down here, not for days, for months, maybe longer. 2 clocks hung on the wall, both frozen at exactly 2:17 in the morning. Why that specific time? Was it a coincidence? A signal? Or a marker for something that happened? Something planned? Something that went terribly wrong? An anonymous FBI agent, quoted in leaked memos, later described the scene with 6 words that have haunted investigators since. Whatever happened in here, they were ready for someone. Forensic specialists immediately began analyzing everything. The materials dated back to 1959 and earlier. But the discovery that changed the entire investigation came when they identified the equipment found inside. These weren't ordinary tools. These were CIA-grade encryption devices from the 1960s, the kind used exclusively for covert operations during the height of the Cold War.
And of course, I must make clear that if I'm putting a message into code using an Enigma machine, the person who's receiving this message must have an identical Enigma machine identically set up to take the message out of code.
What were intelligence tools doing in a hidden chamber beneath America's most famous prison? Who put them there? And more importantly, who was supposed to use them? If you're as obsessed with uncovering buried secrets as we are, make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications. Because what they found in that chamber, it's just the beginning. The answer to these questions may have been buried in government archives for decades, waiting for someone to finally ask the right questions. Project Warden's Shadow. In 1978, a classified program was quietly declassified but never made public. It was called Project Warden's Shadow, a psychological deterrence initiative supposedly run by the Department of Justice with indirect CIA oversight. Officially, it was designed to manipulate high-risk inmates through extreme isolation and stress testing. Unofficially, the documents suggest something far more calculated. According to declassified materials, the program used prisoners as unwitting subjects for surveillance experiments and psychological endurance research. But here is the catch. Alcatraz's remote location wasn't just convenient for keeping criminals locked away. It was strategically perfect for monitoring naval traffic, tracking military movements, and conducting operations invisible to the outside world. The island sits at the mouth of San Francisco Bay, with unobstructed sightlines to every ship entering or leaving one of America's most important ports. If the tunnel was part of Project Warden's Shadow, it would explain everything. Why it was built with such precision. Why it never appeared on any blueprint. Why certain guards from the 1950s and 60s were warned to never ask questions about specific sections of the island. One of those guards, a man we'll call Henry Castellano, worked the night shift at Alcatraz from 1957 to 1961. Now in his late 80s, he agreed to speak anonymously about what he witnessed. His account adds a human dimension to the growing evidence of something deeply wrong beneath the prison. There were nights I'd hear sounds coming from under the laundry block, Castellano recalled. Not pipes, not settling concrete. It sounded like furniture being moved. Voices, maybe. I reported it once, just once. My supervisor, a man named Wallace, pulled me into his office the next morning. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just looked at me and said, "Henry, there are parts of this rock that don't belong to us. You understand?" I never asked again. I wanted to go home to my family. Castellano's account matches others. Guards who heard unexplained sounds. Officers who were transferred suddenly after asking questions. a culture of silence that persisted until the prison closed in 1963.
It's hail and farewell to Alcatraz. The dread rock in San Francisco Bay plays host to the press on its closing day. For the first time in its long penal history, reporters and cameramen are allowed to roam its innermost cell blocks and cells at will.
What was happening beneath Alcatraz that required such enforced ignorance? And does it connect to the most famous prison escape in American history? The escape that wasn't June 11th, 1962. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers vanished from Alcatraz in what became the most legendary prison escape ever attempted. The official story says they fashioned a raft from raincoats and disappeared into the frigid waters of San Francisco Bay. Their bodies were never found. The case was never closed. But here is the catch. With the discovery of this hidden tunnel, a different theory has emerged. What if the escape wasn't what everyone thought? What if Morris and the Anglins never touched the water at all? Engineering analysis of the tunnel reveals it would have emerged below the rocky waterline on the island's northwest face, completely hidden from guard towers and Coast Guard patrol routes. If the escapees knew about this passage, they could have slipped away without ever facing the deadly currents that were supposed to kill them. The water temperature that night was 54 degrees. Survival time without protection, roughly 20 minutes. The tunnel offered a way to bypass death itself. In 2013, a letter allegedly written by John Anglin surfaced. In it, he wrote 5 words that have haunted investigators ever since. "We made it that night, but barely." For years, everyone assumed he meant surviving the bay. But now, those words take on an entirely different meaning. What if barely referred to escaping through a collapsing tunnel? What if the raft was always a decoy designed to send searchers in the wrong direction while the real escape happened underground? And then there's Alan West.
Alan West is almost the project manager of the escape attempt, according to Alan West. Alan West is interrogated by the FBI.
The fourth man in the escape plot, left behind when the others vanished. The official explanation claims he couldn't enlarge his vent hole in time. But what if the truth is simpler and darker? What if he was never meant to know about the real escape route? West was considered unpredictable, prone to talking when he shouldn't. Perhaps Morris and the Anglins decided he was a liability. Perhaps they left him behind on purpose, knowing he'd create a perfect distraction while they disappeared through a passage he never knew existed. The deeper investigators dig, the more questions surface about what really happened that night. The skeleton's secret. At the farthest end of the tunnel, where the ground had partially collapsed and flooded over the decades, investigators made one final discovery. Skeletal remains, half buried in debris, fingers still wrapped around a worn leather satchel. Inside the bag, coins minted in 1961, faded navigational maps, and water-damaged notes, written in a cipher that forensic cryptographers are still working to decode. The coins were pristine, as if they'd been saved for something important. A life after escape, perhaps, or payment for services rendered to someone with deep pockets and deeper secrets. But when forensic teams ran their analysis, the results stopped the entire investigation cold. The skeleton didn't match any known escapee. Not Morris, not the Anglins, not Alan West. The dental records corresponded to no missing person report from that era. The bone structure suggested a man in his 40s. This was someone else entirely. Someone who had never been accounted for. in any official record. Someone who had been erased. This changes everything. If this wasn't a failed escapee, who was it? An accomplice who was abandoned when the plan went wrong. A government operative who knew too much about what was happening beneath Alcatraz. Or someone caught in the middle of something they never should have witnessed. Scratched into the tunnel wall beside the remains, those 4 words still wait for an answer. They left me here. The FBI has refused to comment publicly on the identity, but leaked reports suggest the remains date to early 1962, placing this unknown figure in the tunnel at roughly the same time as the famous escape. Someone was down there, someone who wasn't supposed to be, and someone made sure he never came back up. What they're still hiding, the FBI's official report, quietly released in 2025, contains one line that investigators keep returning to. The tunnel had multiple uses over several years, some of which are not fully understood. Not fully understood. Even the agency that investigated this site admits they don't have the complete picture. But one detail from that report has received almost no attention. Among the documents recovered from the chamber, analysts found requisition forms bearing signatures from 3 different federal agencies: the Department of Justice, the Office of Naval Intelligence, and a third agency whose name was redacted with black ink so thick it bled through to the other side of the page. 3 agencies, 1 hidden tunnel, and a skeleton that belongs to no one. The U.S. Marshals Service still considers the 1962 escape an open case. They've released age progression sketches based on the possibility that one or more of the escapees might still be alive today, living under assumed names, carrying secrets that could rewrite history. Somewhere out there, the truth is waiting. The island's longest shadow, Alcatraz, has always been more than a prison. It's been a symbol of American justice, a monument to the idea that some criminals are too dangerous to ever walk free. But what if the real secret was never the inmates? What if the real secret was what happened beneath their feet, in tunnels they never knew existed, for purposes that remain classified to this day? The hidden passage discovered in 2024 proves one undeniable truth. There are layers to Alcatraz that have never been excavated, stories that have never been told. And somewhere, in classified files and forgotten chambers, the complete history of that island still waits to be uncovered. The skeleton in the tunnel had one final message, scratched into stone with desperate fingers. They left me here. Maybe that's the real story of Alcatraz. Not the criminals who were locked inside, but the people who were buried beneath. The ones someone decided should never see the light of day. The mystery of Alcatraz is far from over. If you want to be here when we uncover what's really buried beneath America's darkest secrets, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next discovery could rewrite history, and we're just getting started.